The rain hit the windows of the exclusive El Gran Roble restaurant, blurring the city lights as if they were watercolor tears on a gray canvas. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, vibrant, and cruelly exclusive. Bernarda, an 80-year-old woman whose elegance could not hide the fragility of her posture, stood before the host stand. She wore her best blue velvet dress, a pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother, and a handbag that trembled imperceptibly between her gloved hands. She had rehearsed this moment all week. Enter with her head held high, ask for a table for one, and celebrate that. Against all odds, she had reached 8 decades of life. However, reality was being much harsher than her imagination. The young man in charge of reservations did not even look her in the eye. He was checking his tablet with mechanical delay, ignoring the silent plea of an old woman who simply did not want to have dinner alone on her most important night. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but without a reservation, it is impossible to accommodate you tonight. We are full," the employee repeated for the 3rd time. He said it with that tone of voice young people use when they believe an elderly person does not understand the rules of the modern world. Bernarda felt the heat rise to her cheeks, not from the cold of the street, but from the piercing shame of feeling invisible, a hindrance in the midst of others' joy. She looked around the room, couples toasting, groups of friends laughing, families celebrating. Everyone seemed to have a place in the world, an assigned space where they were welcome and loved. She, on the other hand, with her immense fortune accumulated after years of running a textile company with an iron fist, could not buy the only thing she really needed that night: company and a little dignity. Loneliness, she thought bitterly, is the only price that money cannot negotiate when time is up. Bernarda sank slowly, swallowing the knot forming in her throat. She was not going to cause a scene. Her aristocratic education and her pride would not allow it. "I understand, young man. Thank you anyway," she murmured with a broken voice, turning on her heels to face the revolving door again and the rainy night that awaited her. She felt ridiculous. Who was she trying to fool? She had driven everyone away in her life with her demands and her coldness, prioritizing success over affection. And now fate was handing her the bill in a restaurant full of people. As she took the first step towards the exit, feeling her legs weigh like lead, a crystalline, childish laugh pierced the murmur of the place. It was a pure sound, full of life, which made her stop by inertia, as if she were looking for a last trace of human warmth before returning to her empty and silent mansion. A few meters from the entrance, at a round table near the window, sat a young man and a little girl. He, whom we will call Damián, looked to be about 30-something years old. He did not dress with the opulence of the other diners. He wore a simple jacket and a white shirt without a tie, but his face radiated a calm kindness. The 6-year-old girl, Luce, had curly hair and large, curious eyes that shone with intelligence. Both had stopped eating. Damián held his fork in the air, but his attention was nailed to the entrance, observing Bernarda's heartbreaking scene of rejection. There was no mockery in his gaze, nor indifference. There was a deep recognition, an empathy that only those who have experienced pain firsthand possess. Damián lowered the fork, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and looked at his daughter, who felt a seriousness inappropriate for her age. Bernarda already had her hand on the cold metal of the door when she felt that someone was watching her. It is that sixth sense that is never lost. The feeling of being the focus of someone's attention. She turned slightly, expecting to see the maître d', watching him leave quickly so as not to spoil the entrance to the place. But it was not him. Her tired eyes met Damián's warm gaze. The man raised his right hand and made a clear, paused, and respectful sign. It was not a gesture of goodbye or a casual greeting. He was signaling for her to come closer. Bernarda frowned, confused. Did she know him? Impossible. She'd been in hiding for years, withdrawn from public life. Was he making fun of her? The paranoia of old age, that voice that tells you everyone looks at you with pity, began to whisper to her to flee, not to expose herself to more humiliation. However, Damián insisted. He stood up, which in itself was an almost extinct act of chivalry, and walked a few steps towards her, dodging a waiter with a tray full of glasses. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said with a soft baritone voice that calmed Bernarda's nerves a bit. "My daughter and I could not help but listen and see what happened. This table is for 4 and there are only 2 of us. It would be an honor for us to have dinner with you. It is raining too hard outside to go without trying a bite." Bernarda was paralyzed. The offer was so unexpected, so genuinely kind, that her brain took a few seconds to process it. She looked at the man, searching for some sign of deception, some hidden camera, something that would justify such generosity in such a selfish world. But she only saw sincerity in dark eyes that were strangely familiar to her. "I don't want to bother you, young man," Bernarda babbled, holding her bag like a shield. "It's a family dinner. I don't want to be an intruder. Besides, today is, well, it doesn't matter." She stopped before confessing that it was her birthday. She didn't want his pity. Damián smiled, and that smile illuminated her tired face. "Precisely because it's a family dinner. We are missing a grandmother at the table," he joked gently, taking the weight off the situation. "Luce, my daughter, says that you look like a fairy tale queen with that necklace, and a queen should not be left standing at the entrance. Please accept. The food here is delicious, but the portions are huge and we need help." The mention of the girl softened the steel armor that Bernarda had built around her heart for decades. She looked at the table and saw little Luce, greeting her with a small hand and a radiant smile. Bernarda felt her eyes getting wet, and she blinked quickly to prevent a tear from ruining her impeccable makeup. It had been years, perhaps decades, since anyone made her feel necessary, even if it was just to help finish a plate of food. She took a hesitant step towards them, and then another. The maitre d', who watched the scene with disbelief from his podium, opened his mouth to protest, probably to say that sharing a table with strangers is not allowed, but a withering look from Damián made him shut up. Damián offered his arm to Bernarda, as a gentleman of another time would have done. When she took it, Bernarda noticed that the sleeve of his jacket was worn at the elbow, a detail denoting that this man worked hard for every penny, which made his invitation even more valuable. He did not have money to spare, but he had a heart to spare. We take a short break here, friends of fascinating roots. It's incredible how a simple gesture can change the day, or even a person's life. Bernarda was about to go home to cry on her birthday, and now she is being escorted like a queen by a stranger. I want to ask you something important. Have you ever felt invisible or rejected in a public place? Or have you been someone's Damián? I would love to read your anecdotes in the comments and know from which part of the world you are joining us today. Do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss the outcome of this story. But Bernarda did not have a chair to sit in front of the girl. As she settled down and saw the faces of her hosts under the warm light of the lamp, Bernarda felt a chill run down her back. There was something in the shape of the girl's eyes, in the arch of her eyebrows, that hit her memory like a hammer. She could not specify what it was, but she felt a magnetic connection, almost painful. "What is your name, young man?" asked Bernarda, trying to keep her composure while her heart was beating wildly. "Damián," he replied, pouring her a glass of water. "And this is Luz. We are celebrating that today I got a new job. And now we celebrate that we have new company." The dinner began with an initial shyness, which soon dissolved thanks to Luz's spontaneity. Afterwards, the girl chatted about her drawings and her school with a contagious joy that filled the voids of silence. Bernarda, who had been used to dining for years with the only sound being her own breathing or the news in the background, surprised herself by genuinely laughing for the first time in decades. Between bite and bite of her seafood soup, Bernarda felt that she had to be honest with these strangers who had welcomed her. "Do you know," she said, leaving the spoon on the plate and looking down at the white tablecloth, "I don't usually go out alone. In fact, today is a special date. I am 80 years old." The confession came out in a whisper, loaded with a vulnerability that scared her. Admitting it out loud made her previous loneliness seem even more pathetic, but it also made Damián and Luz's company an invaluable gift. The reaction was immediate and moving. Luz let out a shout of emotion and began to applaud, with her hands smeared with sauce. "Dad, it's a birthday. We have to sing," Ezekiel exclaimed the girl. Damián smiled broadly and without hesitation made a discreet signal to the waiter. "Please bring the best dessert you have and put a candle on it. We have a lot to celebrate." Bernarda felt a knot in her throat, but this time it was not sadness, but overwhelming gratitude. "Why are you doing this?" she asked with a trembling voice, looking Damián in the eyes. "You don't even know my last name. I could be a grumpy and unpleasant old woman." Damián shrugged with that tranquility that only good-hearted men have. "Why should anyone blow out candles alone, ma'am? And why did my mother always say that a shared table tastes better than a lonely banquet?" Her mother's mention made a fleeting shadow cross Damián's face. Bernarda, with her sharp instinct from years of reading people in business, noticed it immediately. "Your mother must be a very wise woman to have educated you like that," she commented, feeling out the terrain. Damián felt like drinking a sip of the house cheap wine. "She was. She died a few months ago. She was a tireless fighter. She raised me alone, working in other people's houses, cleaning floors and taking care of children who were not hers, so that I could study." Bernarda felt an uncomfortable puncture in her stomach. The story was vaguely familiar to her, a common narrative in her world of servitude and employers. But there was something in Damián's tone, in the dignity with which he spoke of poverty, that worried her deeply. "And your father?" Bernarda asked, driven by a curiosity that went beyond courtesy. Damián nodded, cutting a piece of meat for Luz. I never met him. My mother never wanted to talk about him. She only said it was a mistake of youth. Someone from a world very different from ours, who did not have the courage to stay. Bernarda observed Damián's profile under the golden light of the restaurant, the shape of his nose, the line of his jaw. Suddenly, a memory from 35 years ago struck her with the force of a train. That jaw was identical to that of her own son, Rodrigo, who had died in a ski accident a decade ago. The resemblance was so chilling that Bernarda had to grab the edge of the table so as not to get dizzy. It couldn't be. It was an impossible coincidence. What is your last name, son? Bernarda asked, trying to make her voice sound casual, although she was trembling inside. Torres, he replied. Damián Torres. Bernarda's world stopped suddenly. The sound of the silverware, the laughter of the other diners, the rain outside, everything disappeared. Torres. Elena Torres's last name. The young maid who had worked in her mansion for more than 3 decades. The same girl whom Bernarda had fulminantly fired when she discovered that she was pregnant, accusing her of immorality and of trying to trap her son Rodrigo. Bernarda remembered giving her an envelope with money and threatening her to disappear and never stain the family name. Elena had been crying, swearing that the baby was the fruit of love. But Bernarda, in her classist arrogance, had not wanted to listen. Bernarda looked at Damián with renewed horror. She was not having dinner with a kind stranger. She was having dinner with her own grandson, the secret son she had taken care to erase from the family history to avoid a scandal. And that girl Luz, with those big and expressive eyes. Those were Rodrigo's eyes. The cold and heavy guilt fell on the old woman's shoulders like a tombstone. She had spent the last few years lamenting the death of her only son and the lack of heirs, while her own blood, alive and fighting, had been passing by a few miles from her mansion of gold. She felt dirty, unworthy of sitting at that table, unworthy of eating the bread that this man, whom she had condemned to poverty before birth, was offering her with such generosity. Is something wrong, ma'am? You've gone very pale, asked Damián, concerned, leaning towards her. Bernarda shook her head, unable to articulate a word. Damián, misinterpretando her silence as fatigue or sadness, continued speaking to distract her. I know life is hard. My mother, Elena, went through a lot. There was a time we lived in a room without windows because a rich employer threw her out on the street without paying her what she was owed, just because she was pregnant with me. But she never held a grudge. She always told me, Damián, never lose hope, because resentment is a poison that only kills the one who carries it. She taught me to be a man, not with money, but with values. Every word was a slap in Bernarda's face. The rich employer was her, and the woman she had destroyed had raised a better man than anyone Bernarda had ever known in her social circle. The waiter arrived with a small chocolate cake crowned by a solitary candle, singing a discreet happy birthday. Luz applauded enthusiastically, and Damián smiled warmly. Bernarda watched the candle flame dancing fragilely before her eyes. She should be happy, but she felt like she was drowning. She wanted to scream, to beg for forgiveness on her knees, to tell Damián, it's me. I'm the witch from your mother's story. I'm your grandmother, but fear paralyzed her. How would he react? He would surely hate her. He would surely take loose and leave, leaving her alone forever. And this time, the loneliness would be deserved and eternal. So she did the only thing her cowardice allowed her to do at that moment. She closed her eyes, made a silent wish for redemption, and blew out the candle, plunging the table into a small cloud of sweet smoke. "Bravo!" shouted Luce. Damián cut the cake and served the largest piece to Bernarda. "I hope you wished for something good," he said. Bernarda tasted the cake. It tasted like ash due to her guilt, but she forced herself to swallow it. "Damián," she began, with the steadiest voice she could muster. "You mentioned you got a new job. What do you do?" She needed to know more. She needed to find a way to repair the damage without revealing her identity just yet. "I am a carpenter, a cabinet maker to be exact," he replied with pride, although then his expression turned a bit somber. "Well, I was. The workshop where I worked closed down. The new job is actually a temporary gig carrying cement sacks. It pays less and it's hard on the back, but I need to save. I want to open my own workshop someday so Luce won't lack for anything." Bernarda clutched her handbag under the table. Here was her chance. Bernarda took a breath, knowing she had to act with caution. If she offered him money directly, Damián's pride, that same dignified pride she saw in his eyes, would make him reject it. She had to be more cunning. "Damián," she said, taking a small notebook out of her designer bag. "Coincidences of life. I have an old property on the outskirts, an old mansion that has been closed for years. I need to restore the library and the main stairs. And modern carpenters only want to use particle board and plastic. I need a real cabinet maker, someone who respects wood. Would you be interested in taking a look? I will pay a fair price, of course." Damián opened his eyes in surprise. "Really, ma'am? I don't have my workshop set up yet. I work with basic tools." "Tools don't make the master, son. It's the hands," Bernarda interrupted firmly. "Write down your number here." Damián wrote his phone number on a paper napkin with a pen borrowed from the waiter, as he didn't have business cards. He handed it to Bernarda with a mixture of hope and shyness. When the bill arrived, Bernarda motioned to take out her gold credit card, but Damián was faster and put his hand on the table. "Don't even think about it, Bernarda. Today is your birthday and you are my guest. I won't take no for an answer." Bernarda felt her heart shrink. She knew that dinner would probably cost what Damián earned in 2 days of hard labor, carrying cement. "But Damián, it's an expensive place," she tried to protest. "Money comes and goes, ma'am. Moments remain. Let me have the pleasure," he insisted with a smile that admitted no reply. Bernarda watched in silence with a sharp pain in her chest as Damián took out a worn wallet and counted crumpled, low-denomination bills to cover the total and leave a decent tip. She saw how he calculated mentally, probably subtracting something from his weekly expenses to pay for that gesture of kindness. She, who had millions in the bank and who used to complain if the coffee wasn't at the perfect temperature, felt minuscule before the greatness of this humble man. She realized that true class was not in surnames or bank accounts, but in the capacity to give what you don't have to spare. Bernarda realized that Elena, Damián's mother, had done an exceptional job raising a gentleman, while she, with all her resources, had not known how to value people. They left the restaurant. The rain had stopped, leaving a smell of wet asphalt and clean air. "Well, Bernarda, it has been an honor," said Damián. Little Luz ran towards the old woman and hugged her legs tightly. "Happy birthday, Grandma Bernarda," shouted the girl. The physical contact disarmed the old woman. Her knees trembled. She crouched down with difficulty and caressed her great-granddaughter's cheek, holding back tears. "Thank you, my child. It has been the best gift." At that moment, a luxurious black car with a chauffeur stopped in front of them. The uniformed driver got out quickly to open the rear door. "Mrs. Bernarda, excuse the delay," said the chauffeur. Damián and Luz stood open-mouthed, seeing the vehicle. Bernarda saw the surprise in her grandson's eyes. He didn't know she was rich. He just thought she was an elegant old woman. "You have a chauffeur?" asked Damián, a bit intimidated, taking a step back. Bernarda internally cursed her usual ostentation, but recovered quickly. "It's a taxi service I use sometimes because of my age. Son, don't worry. Call me tomorrow about the mansion. Good night." She got into the car quickly before having to give more explanations and closed the door. As the car drove away, Bernarda looked out the rear window and saw Damián and Luz waving under the light of a street lamp. Two small figures in an immense city. Bernarda leaned back on the leather seat, took out her phone, and dialed a number, ignoring the late hour. "I want you to prepare the papers for the Los Olivos property," she ordered her lawyer with a firm voice. "And I want you to look for the best woodworking machinery on the market. We start a renovation tomorrow." The next morning, Damián called the number on the napkin. He expected it to be a false alarm or that the old woman had forgotten her promise. But Bernarda answered on the first ring. She gave him the address of an old mansion in the historic district, a property Bernarda had bought as an investment and that was practically abandoned. When Damián arrived with his old truck and basic tools, he found Bernarda waiting for him at the door, dressed in simpler clothes so as not to intimidate him. "Welcome, Damián. Come in, please," she told him. Upon entering, Damián was amazed. The high ceilings, the wood moldings, the majestic staircase, although dusty. It was any cabinet maker's dream. It's incredible," he whispered, running his hand along an oak banister. "The job is yours if you want it," said Bernarda, watching him with a hidden affection. "But I have conditions. First, I want you to restore this wood as if it were for your own house. Second, I need you to buy new tools. I don't want you to ruin this wood with old saws." Damián lowered his head, embarrassed. "Ma'am, I appreciate the opportunity, but I don't have capital to invest in machinery right now. I can barely make ends meet." Bernarda smiled, a mischievous grandmother smile, enjoying her plan. "Don't worry about that. I will put up the initial capital as an advance on the work. You put in the labor and the talent. Deal?" Damián looked at her as if he were seeing an angel. He didn't know he was seeing his grandmother trying to pay an unpayable debt. The following days were of frenetic activity. Bernarda, who used to spend her days bored in board meetings or playing bridge, now went to the construction site every day. She sat on a folding chair with a thermos of coffee and watched Damián work. Seeing him plane the wood, measure with millimeter precision, and treat every piece with respect, confirmed to her that he carried the blood of artists in his veins. Sometimes loose when after school and sat drawing on the floor, filling the old house with laughter. Bernarda took advantage of those moments to play with her, read her stories, and subtly buy her new clothes or toys she had kept from when her son was little. She was building the memories she had missed for 30 years. However, keeping the secret was becoming increasingly difficult. One day, while sharing some sandwiches during a break, Damián asked a question that froze Bernarda's blood. "Mrs. Bernarda, you mention your son a lot. The one who had these toys. Where is he now? I never see him visiting you." Bernarda felt the weight of the lie in her throat. She looked at an imaginary photo on the empty wall. "He left a long time ago, Damián. I made mistakes with him. I was tough, demanding. I thought success was the only thing that mattered, and I lost him." Her eyes filled with real tears. Damián, always empathetic, put a hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes, Bernarda. My mother always said that as long as we are alive, there's time to fix things. Maybe he will forgive you wherever he is." Bernarda had to bite her lip not to scream at him. "You are him. You are what remains of him." The restoration work at the Los Olivos mansion was almost finished. Under Damián's expert hands, the old oak wood had recovered its golden and majestic shine, transforming the ruin into a warm and cozy home. Bernarda observed the result with a pride that swelled her chest, not only for the beauty of the place, but for the undeniable talent of her grandson. That day, she carried a newly drafted legal document in her handbag. The deeds to the house. She had decided to transfer the property to Damián Torres's name as a final payment for his services, an early inheritance disguised as a work bonus. She knew it was risky. She knew he would be suspicious of such generosity, but her health was failing, and the urgency to secure Luz and Damián's future weighed more than her fear of being discovered. Bernarda felt ready to take the step, never imagining that fate would beat her to it. It was a stormy afternoon, very similar to the night they met. Bernarda and Damián were in the library checking the final details of the shelves. Luz was playing on the rug with an antique music box that Bernarda had given her. Suddenly, Bernarda felt intense dizziness, a result of her blood pressure and the nerves of the moment. She stumbled and had to hold onto a table, knocking her handbag to the floor in the process. The contents scattered across the polished wooden floor: keys, coin purse, her pills, and an old leather wallet that popped open upon impact. Damián ran to help her. "Bernarda, are you okay?" he asked, alarmed, helping her sit in an armchair. Yes. It's just an old woman's dizzy spell, son." "Don't be scared," she replied, trying to catch her breath. While Damián went to get a glass of water, little Luz, always helpful, began to pick things up from the floor. "I'll help you, Grandma Bernarda," said the girl sweetly. She picked up the lipstick, the keys, and the open wallet. As she lifted it, a black and white photograph slid out of a secret compartment in the wallet. It was a photo worn by time and kisses that showed a handsome young man of about 20 years old smiling in front of a sports car. Luz stared at the photo, frowning with that childish curiosity that has no filters. When Damián returned with the water, the girl extended the photo to him. Look, Dad, this man has your same face, but with prince clothes. Is it you when you were little? Damián, with the glass of water in one hand, took the photo with the other, smiling at his daughter's idea. No, my love, I never had clothes like... He swallowed hard. The smile froze on his lips. He looked at the image and felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. The man in the photo was his spitting image, an almost exact copy of himself, but with a more carefree and wealthy look. Damián turned the photo over with trembling hands. On the back, in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting, was written, "To my beloved son, Rodrigo, 1985. Rodrigo. The name resonated in Damián's head like a cannon shot. His mother, in her feverish moments before dying, had whispered that name with a mixture of love and infinite pain. Rodrigo, whispered Damián, feeling sudden nausea. Bernarda, who had already recovered a bit from the dizziness, saw the photo in Damián's hands and went deadly pale. She tried to get up to snatch it from him, but her legs did not respond. The secret she had guarded so jealously was now exposed in the palm of her grandson's hand. Damián looked up slowly, and Bernarda saw how the warmth and affection that used to inhabit his dark eyes transformed into confusion, and then into icy suspicion. "Who is this man, Bernarda?" asked Damián with a voice that didn't sound like his own, a deep and trembling voice. "Why do you have a photo of a man named Rodrigo, who is identical to me? Why did you approach us in the restaurant? This wasn't a coincidence, was it?" We take a critical pause in this moment of unbearable tension. Friends of fascinating routes, the truth has come to light in the most unexpected way. Bernarda is cornered by her own past. Damián is not stupid. He is connecting the dots at breakneck speed. The pain of feeling deceived can be stronger than any gratitude. I want to ask you, what would you do in Damián's place? Would you feel relief at finding your roots or fury at the deception? Comment the word truth if you believe that lies, however pious, always end up causing pain. Don't go anywhere because the coming confrontation will change everything. Damián, please, let me explain, begged Bernarda, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. I didn't want you to find out like this. Damián took a step back, instinctively pulling loose away from her, as if Bernarda were now a threat. Explain what? That you've been playing fairy godmother with us? My mother told me about a Rodrigo. She told me he was a good man, but that his family, his mother, was a monster who destroyed our lives. Damián looked at Bernarda with horrified recognition. You are Bernarda, Bernarda de la Vega, the owner of the textile mills. My mother worked for you. You were the one who threw her out on the street when she was pregnant with me. You are the reason my mother died working like a slave. The accusation hit Bernarda harder than any physical slap. She couldn't deny it. There was no possible defense for the cruelty of her past. Yes, it's me, confessed Bernarda, lowering her head, defeated. I was the one who committed that sin, Damián. And I have lived every day of the last 30 years paying for it in loneliness and bitterness. Rodrigo died without knowing about you. When I saw you in the restaurant, I saw his eyes. I saw my blood. I just wanted to repair the damage, son. I just wanted to give you what is rightfully yours. Bernarda took the envelope with the deeds out of her bag and put it on the table with a trembling hand. This house is yours. It's for you and for Luce. It is my way of asking for forgiveness. Damián looked at the envelope with contempt, as if it contained poison. His breathing was agitated, his face red with anger and pain. "Do you think you can buy me with a house?" he shouted, scaring Luce, who hid behind his legs. "Do you think a few bricks and fine wood can pay for my mother's tears? The nights we spent cold, the humiliation. She died young, worn out, because you decided we weren't good enough for your surname. And now, because you feel lonely and old, you think you can come and play the charitable granny to clean your conscience." Damián picked Luce up in his arms tightly. "I don't want your house. I don't want your money. And I definitely don't want your last name." "Damián, wait," shouted Bernarda, trying to get up from the armchair, reaching a desperate hand towards him. "You are my grandson. Luce is my great-granddaughter. You are all I have left." But Damián was already walking towards the door with the firm step of a man wounded in the depths of his dignity. He stopped at the threshold, turned his head, and looked at her with eyes that no longer had a shine, only infinite disappointment. "You have nothing, Mrs. Bernarda. You have money, you have properties, you have a chauffeur, but family? You have no family. Family is cared for, not discarded. Keep your restored mansion. We are going back to our poverty, where at least we sleep with a clear conscience." And with a slam that resonated like a gunshot in the empty mansion, Damián walked out of her life, taking the light that had barely begun to illuminate Bernarda's darkness. Bernarda was left alone in the immense mansion, surrounded by the echo of the slamming door and the sepulchral silence that followed. She let herself fall back into the armchair, feeling the years crash down on her all at once, crushing her. For the first time, her money was useless. She had tried to buy Damián's affection, like buying a stock in the market, and had failed miserably. That night, Bernarda didn't call her chauffeur. She sat in the dark, looking at the wood Damián had polished with so much love, finally understanding that the restoration her family needed was not of furniture, but of souls. She understood that forgiveness is not signed before a notary. It is earned with humility and time. Two things she had never been willing to offer. 2 weeks passed. Damián did not return. The work remained paralyzed. Bernarda fell into bed, not from a physical illness, but from a deep sadness that took away her will to live. Her lawyer suggested suing Damián for breach of contract to force him to return, but Bernarda fired him with shouts. "No one will touch my grandson," she exclaimed. In her solitude, Bernarda took a pen and paper. She didn't write a check. She wrote a letter, a long letter stained with tears, where she didn't justify herself, but stripped herself emotionally bare. She told Damián about the fears she had of losing Rodrigo, about how her arrogance was a mask to hide her insecurity, and she acknowledged for the first time out loud that Elena had been a superior woman to her because she knew how to love unconditionally. Bernarda went personally to Damián's small apartment in the working-class neighborhood. She didn't take the chauffeur. She took a taxi and walked the last few blocks under the scorching sun, carrying an old toolbox that had belonged to Rodrigo when he was a child, and the letter. She left the things in front of Damián's door, rang the bell, and hid behind a staircase, not having the courage to face him. Damián opened the door, saw the box and the envelope. Reading the letter, sitting in his kitchen, Bernarda's words cut deep. There was no arrogance in those lines, only the raw regret of a mother who failed and a grandmother who didn't want to die alone without knowing her blood. Luce, who missed her storybook grandmother, saw her father crying silently while he read. "Dad, is Grandma Bernarda bad?" asked the girl innocently. Damián looked at his daughter. Then he looked at his father's toolbox that Bernarda had left him. Inside there was a note. "These were your father's. He wanted to build things. I forced him to study finance. Don't make my mistake. Build your life, Damián, with or without me, but be happy." Damián remembered his mother Elena's words. Resentment is a poison. He realized that if he continued hating Bernarda, he would be perpetuating the cycle of pain his mother wanted to break. Forgiving didn't mean forgetting the past, but freeing the future. We take a final pause before the outcome. Family of fascinating roots. Forgiveness is the most difficult and courageous decision a human being can make. Damián has the right to be furious, but he has the duty, for his daughter and for his mother's memory, to seek peace. Sometimes the villains in our story are just broken people who didn't know how to do better. Would you forgive Bernarda? Write the word family in the comments if you believe that blood calls, and it is never too late to start over. Don't miss the emotional ending. The next day, Bernarda was at the mansion, preparing to sell it. There was no point in keeping it anymore. Suddenly, she heard a noise at the entrance. Firm steps, followed by tiny steps. She turned with her heart in her throat. There stood Damián in his work clothes, and Luce, who ran to hug her without hesitation. Bernarda broke down crying, hugging the girl. Damián remained standing, serious but serene. "I don't want the house as a gift, Bernarda," he said firmly, "but I accept the job. I will finish the restoration and I will charge for it. And you can come to dinner with us on Sundays, not as the owner, but as the grandmother. We'll start like that, slowly." Bernarda nodded, unable to speak, accepting her grandson's conditions with a new humility. It was the beginning of a slow and painful reconstruction, but a firm one. Damián finished the mansion, which became his workshop and home, but he insisted on paying Bernarda a symbolic rent until he could buy it legitimately with his work. Bernarda learned to respect Damián's boundaries, stopped trying to control him with money, and began to earn his affection with acts of presence. Taking care of Luce when she was sick, cooking, or trying to cook for them, and listening to stories about Elena without judging, honoring her memory. Over time, the pain of the past transformed into a scar that no longer hurt, only reminded them of what they had survived. Bernarda used her fortune to create the Elena Torres Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers without resources. A public gesture that cleared the name of the woman she had despised and showed Damián that his grandmother's change was real. The day they inaugurated the Torres cabinet-making workshop, Bernarda cut the ribbon next to Damián and Luce. There was no press, no high society, just the three of them and the photo of Rodrigo and Elena presiding over the place. Bernarda lived to see Luce graduate from primary school and to see Damián become the best cabinet maker in the city. She passed away in peace years later, holding her grandson's hand. At her funeral, there were no empty speeches. Damián stood before her grave and said, "My grandmother wasn't perfect. She committed unforgivable mistakes, but she had the courage to spend her last years trying to fix them. And in the end, she didn't die as the owner of an empire, but as my grandmother. That is the only thing that counts. This story teaches us that it is never too late to mend the path, but also that forgiveness is not a blank check. It is a daily job, like carving wood, requiring patience, effort, and love. Bernarda found her table in the restaurant of life, thanks to a gesture of kindness from the person she least expected, and that lesson saved her from eternal loneliness. Thank you for joining us on Fascinating Roots. If this story of redemption and second chances has moved you, please subscribe, share the video, and never forget that sometimes the stranger you signal to sit with you might be the angel your life was waiting for. Until the next story.